In the course of every life, there are moments that give us pause, that make us stop and consider both where we are and, perhaps more importantly, how we got here. Now, sometimes those moments of pause are deeply personal, individual, scattered along the paths as we each find our way through the familiar vicissitudes of life, the ups and downs, the highs and lows, the ebbs and flows. But other times, as we know, we hit those sobering pauses all at once. And something happens, and the entire world seems to stop and have to turn and face in a new direction, to stop and to ask that question, how did we get here? Maybe some of you felt it this week. I did. As so many have commented, watching rioters storm the Capitol building, our lawmakers hurried into an undisclosed location felt eerily similar to 9/11. And there were striking similarities. Both were brought on by a kind of radical ideology. Both came cloaked in religion, wrapped in intolerance, and fueled by hate. And perhaps most damning of all, both were the direct result of a leader who cared more ultimately for himself than the people he claimed to support. In the end, the biggest difference, of course, was that this attack on our nation was brought on by ourselves. Which meant that ultimately, though the death toll was relatively low, though even one is too many, the casualties are far too high to count. I've tried my best, believe it or not, friends, over the last 4 years, to walk a fine line, to speak out against that which I truly believe every Christian has a responsibility to oppose, while at the same time recognizing that reasonable, faithful people can and sometimes should disagree. Believe it or not, I do not want to be political. I have every desire in the very core of my being to be faithful, because I know that someday I will have to look my grandchildren in the eye, if I am lucky enough to live that long and blessed enough to have them, and explain what I was trying to do in this moment. I know, preacher, can't we just talk about the Good Samaritan and go to brunch? Trust me, no one wants that more than I. I, too, am tired of this. I, too, long for nothing more than to go back to bed, to pull the blankets over my head and just pretend like none of this is happening. But it is. And pretending like it's not doesn't make it go away. Friends, as a person of faith, as a Christian, I have a responsibility not just to face hard times, but to talk about them. After all, we got to this mess in part because we're not able to talk about hard things as a world, as a nation, as a people. We can talk about each other, around each other, through each other, but not to one another. We teach our children that it's not polite to talk about politics or religion or sex or money. Is it any wonder that those are the very things we have trouble with in our world? Friends, it's time to start talking about these things. If we can't talk about it in church, then where can we? Because in this moment of pause, all of us have suddenly recognized that something has to change. If the last 4 years haven't convinced us, then surely the last week has. And here's the thing, friends, our problem doesn't go away on January 20th. To be clear, the current president bears a great deal of blame for where we find ourselves. 5 people are dead, egged on by him. Rioters stormed the Capitol building, carrying giant flags with one name on them in big letters. Oh, they carried other things as well. Racist and anti-Semitic symbols, from Confederate flags to nooses, all the direct result of 4 years of dog whistles to white supremacists and a refusal to accept even a modicum of personal responsibility. Can we imagine this happening with any previous president, Republican or Democrat? The answer is no. But that's not because we haven't seen something like this before. 90 years ago in Germany, another demagogue rose to power by turning his supporters into a paramilitary organization that attempted to stifle parliamentary procedure. They were known colloquially as the brown shirts. But friends, whether they're wearing brown shirts or red hats, wrong is wrong. This is not about being a Republican or a Democrat. It's not about being conservative or liberal. It's not about right or left. This is about right and wrong. There are good people in both parties, as we know from our own congregation. And there are valuable conversations to be had about the role of government, about economic development, about how do we regulate markets. But that's not what this is about. This is about who we are and who we long to be. The reason the entire world paused this week and turned their eyes to the hill, wondering from where their help would come, is because we all recognize that this is not where we want to be. Maybe someday our historians will help us understand how a reality TV star who spent his life in unrepentant greed, serial adultery, and compulsive deceit, managed to convince so many well-meaning, hard-working, often Christian Americans that he was their champion. That, of course, was one of the most disturbing things about what happened on Wednesday. How many people were there, quote unquote, in the name of God? I even saw one man screaming his face off at an officer, shaking a Bible at him. If only he had stopped to read it. So yes, our current president deserves a great deal of the blame for where we find ourselves, friends, but not all of it. This problem is too deep and too broad for any one person to take all of the blame. Yes, after January 20th, he will blessedly no longer have access to our nuclear codes, but make no mistake, he has already unleashed a weapon far more destructive, because it wasn't aimed at our bodies, but at our hearts and our minds, and it has torn apart families and friendships and congregations. This is not who we long to be. And the damage that has been done won't be fixed when a new president is in the White House, because it didn't start when this one arrived. It's been coming on for some time. We've known it, haven't we? We've felt it, that divide, that chasm that has opened up between us. We've lost good people even here. I mourn every single one. I recognize a big part of my job is to help the church grow, but friends, the biggest part of my job is to help this congregation understand what it means to be Christians. Division divides us all. We felt it coming. We claim to be in this moment more connected than ever before. But we know in our hearts that it's not true. Sure, we can email, we can text, we can tweet, we can put out 240-character missives and pretend like it's conversation, anything to not have to look the other person in the eye. Yes, technology can help us to connect, he says as he stares into the camera. It can be the start of a conversation, but certainly not the end. And friends, so long as we continue to give more power to those unseen voices behind our screens and not any to the people who God has placed right in front of us, the longer we will suffer. Don't you see? It's time for a transfer of power, not in the highest levels of our government, but in the deepest areas of our hearts. It's time to transfer our power away from the pettiness of partisanship, away from the 24-hour tyranny of the news cycle, away from the gravitational pull of our screens and toward life together, real life. We have to be willing to let go of some of those things that we think divide us so that we can find those things that unite us. Friends, let us find life together. Messy, complicated, ugly, and yet somehow beautiful life. That's who we're called to be as Christians. People who find life together. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. And we know the way to find it. We just have to do it. But it means admitting sometimes that we've been wrong, that we have been wrong, that I have been wrong. It means being willing to be the bigger person. It means being willing to give someone the benefit of the doubt. It means taking a look at the world that we find ourselves in and being willing to make a change. If we want to change the world, we have to change the way we live within it. Fortunately for us, this is the time of year when that happens, isn't it? It's resolution time. This is the moment in which each of us pauses to think about how we've been living our lives and to reorient ourselves for the future, to make some corrections. What is a resolution if not a recognition of God's good gift of free will? The ability to make a choice, a change. Maybe we should break with tradition this year and make a resolution together. Don't worry, we could each still work on stopping biting our nails or losing some weight or raising our pledge to a tithe. I assume those are the big three. But maybe we could also, for the sake of the world, make another resolution together. Maybe each of us in this moment could commit to a peaceful transfer of power, not in the White House, but in our house, in our hearts, right here. Maybe each of us could consider what it is that we could do to bring us a little closer to that world we all long for. Maybe each of us could stop saying we can't change anyone's minds and start working on changing our own hearts. Maybe we could reach out because you know what? It's hard to hate someone who has shown you love. That is who we are called to be as Christians. It's hard, yes, but that's part of it. This is a day in which we remember our baptism together, and it starts by remembering the baptism of Jesus. That moment in which he went to John and asked to be baptized in the Jordan River. Yes, it seems like only last week he was a baby. But above all else, this is a moment in which there is a peaceful transition of power from John to Jesus, the start of his ministry, a transfer of power bound and ground in humility. I am not worthy to untie the thong of his sandals. A transfer of power blessed from above. Here is my son, the beloved, with him I am well pleased. A transfer of power that was eventually shared with us. You are the light of the world. If we want our light to shine, we have to give it power. which just might mean taking some power away from those other things in life that purport to offer us something that don't in the end, to take away from those things that are draining life from us and start giving our effort, our energy, our own personal power of choice to those things that are willing to build up and not tear down. This has been a dark week in our world. But we believe in a light that shines in the darkness that no darkness can overwhelm. Only the thing is, we can't look out there for it. We have to look in here. And we have to be willing to find whatever it is that is blocking others from seeing it and let it go, so that we can let our light shine. It's time for a transfer of power. Friends, we don't know what the future holds. We never know what a day is going to bring, but we know that we don't have to face it together. Do you hear? We don't have to. We don't have to think the same way, to face in the same direction, but it does help if we can be close enough to hear each other. So let's commit to that. To keeping those lines of conversation open, to resolving each and every one of us to a peaceful transfer of power, to finding a way to repent and to turn in a new direction. This week has given us all pause, and it's forced us to recognize that something needs to change. The good news is that each of us has the power to do it. The question is, do we have the courage? Amen.